enough from me in terms of the health effects. I'd like now to introduce Lorraine Ball. Now, Lorraine's come all the way from Morwell today, and she's volunteered to speak in front of this very large group of people. Lorraine's a retired health information manager. She's really concerned about not only her future, but all of our future in light of recent events in the Latrobe Valley, and as Mark said in his introduction, for the fire risk not to be taken very seriously. It is something that we really have to look at. Lorraine really encourages people to speak out and make your views known. I think that that's something that SCAR is also really interested in people doing. For a long time, I think that Anglesea people have been somewhat loath to speak out because of all the jobs that the power station has supported in Geelong. But now that that's no longer the case, this is our opportunity to speak up and let our concerns be known so that change can occur. So thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you very much for having me down here. Is this mic working properly? Yeah, very good. I'm very pleased to be able to come down here today. We have a lot of similarities between here and the Latrobe Valley. You've got a brown coal mine on your doorstep. You've got power stacks which produce lots of pollution every day. And it seems that yours has a little bit more sulphur dioxide than mine, but we've got more power stations. The big difference between your coal mine here and the coal mine that I have about 500-600 metres from my house is that it caught on fire. Now, I hope you can hear me. I'd just like to explain the fire which happened on the 9th of February to you. On the 9th of February, it was conditions equivalent to Black Saturday, which was high winds, high temperatures, and a heavy fuel load. Sorry, I'll just come this side, you'll be fine. This is Morwell here. That's obviously to Melbourne, and this is heading up to Traralgon. Now, a couple of days before the 9th of February, around the 6th or 7th, we had a fire start over here near the Lawn mine. And that sort of blew into the Lawn mine a little bit, but it also blew across the highway. Then the 9th of February hit, the winds blew everywhere. We had arson happening down along this road which led to Merburn North and the Streslackies. You might remember the Delbourne fire. That's here. So that we had fires all through here. There was also another deliberately lit fire here. The winds were so strong that it blew all the fire down towards the mines, more into the Lawn coal mine, then across the north side of Morwell. So we had fire impacting on the north, to the northeast, across the south, into here, and we have the briquette and char plant here that also caught fire, I think from spontaneous combustion. So we had all the main access routes out of the town blocked off, apart from going east to Traralgon. My house is down here, and this area was evacuated. I wasn't there, unfortunately. I was up in Merburn North. So I drove back into Morwell and I observed fire all around there. I got home about 2:15. It was probably 4 o'clock when I got an SMS message to say, there's a bushfire out here. There was no notification given to me to say, you've got to get out of here, despite the fact that we were surrounded. There's a lot to be improved there. So I just wanted to give you a picture of what it was like on that day. Now, this is what the mine fire looked like. That is a 120 metre high wall of flame. And that was just here, 400 metres from the houses. course, coal mines don't burn cleanly. The ash which was covering the town and the surrounding valley drifted all the way to Bairnsdale at times, to the outskirts of Melbourne, over to South Gippsland. That was incompletely burnt coal. So when coal gets burnt in a power station, it's combusted to a very high temperature, I think about 1600 degrees. And then there are filters on the stacks which will filter out a lot of the contaminants. When the coal mine fire burnt, it was incompletely combusted. All the contaminants just went straight across the surrounding area, and particularly my house. If you can imagine a thick fog and then add into it a sandstorm, you've got a picture of what the conditions were like in the town. People suffered all sorts of health effects. There was an increase in asthma. The local chemist was the first person to start handing out masks, at least a week before the government thought to do it. He also had a huge increase in puffers and preventers that were being sold across the counter. In the end, he was just giving them away because so many people were coming in saying, I can't breathe. The breathing problems were worse if you already had an existing condition. One of my neighbours has been affected by asbestos, again through the power stations, and he was getting severe pains every time he breathed, even in his house. There was a lot of eye, nose and throat irritation, skin rashes, headaches, vomiting, widespread lethargy. Everyone felt really tired, and we didn't know why. There was a lot of community distress about why aren't people paying attention to me, and where's the government and who's going to help me. And when advice to leave town started coming out, there were many people who just didn't have the money to get up and go or didn't have anywhere to go. So there was a lot of community distress. We did have a couple of community meetings which were organised by the authorities. They got very unruly as people demanded to know what was happening. So they didn't organise any more meetings. It was left up to a local community group which sprang out of the distress called Voices for the Valley. The first rally which they held in our major meeting area got over 1,200 people come into the local town hall, I guess you might call it. And they were very upset. They then organised a class action, and they've been taking affidavits of people's evidence as to their health concerns, the financial concerns. Because if you're told to go away somewhere, you might have to pay for your accommodation, your food, care of your pets, all sorts of things, extra travel expenses. The houses are generally fairly old in the town, particularly in the southern area. You might have heard of South Morwell. That just means below the railway line. It's not a separate suburb. Now, South Morwell got the worst impact, and so some of the relief money was just targeted at people from South Morwell. The people who lived the other side of the railway track were treated differently. And they're saying, our house is still full of ash. I can't breathe. Everything in my house stinks of smoke. But because I'm the wrong side of the railway line, you're saying I can't have any money. There were people who may have had 2 jobs. You know, they're a double income family. But by the time they pay all their regular expenses and their mortgage, etc., they didn't have money to go away. They couldn't go and leave their jobs, so they were stuck in this situation for 45 days. Eventually there was a community health assessment clinic set up down at one of the shopping centres. There's an ambulance station just nearby, so they assessed over 2,000 people, mostly with all of the health complaints that I've detailed for you. We also had a carbon monoxide day. At any one time there were 200 firefighters down in the mine, and they rotated on a 2-hourly shift. and there was about 2,000 of them rotating through. Now, initially they were sent in without carbon monoxide monitors and without breathing equipment, and some of them started collapsing. And then they were given one monitor for a team. After a little bit of agitation, they were all given monitors. We had carbon monoxide come up into the town on one particular day, and we had to evacuate again. The pets were also affected. They also had lots of eye irritations and nose and breathing problems. I also heard there was one dog who was sent to Melbourne on life support, and I know some of the horses were suffering because you can't bring them inside out of the smoke, can you? For my own cat, he was absolutely lifeless. All he wanted to do was sit inside and sleep. He would come in and he'd have black all around his nose, and I had to brush him off every few days to get all the coal dust out of his fur. In my house it's fairly well sealed, but I've got floors like this in some of the part of the house, and I would wash those every day. There's only me there and the cat most of the time. My son comes home at the weekends. And I would wash the floor every day, and the water would be jet black, even though I have a well-sealed house. There are people who've had to evacuate and they can't come home until the house is cleaned. The nursing homes had to be evacuated. One of them has just returned after 6 weeks. They've been away from their normal living quarters, and they had to wait until the nursing home got thoroughly cleaned. The schools, I think, are heading back. After probably 2 weeks, the Education Department decided that this wasn't really a nice place for children. At first they said, oh, the Education Department's okay, we've got guidelines, teachers aren't stupid, they'll keep the kids inside. Well, parents found the kids were coming home covered in ash. They'd been having a nice time. So then the Education Department decided, yeah, maybe we ought to move them to somewhere else. So they were getting bussed from Warwell over to Moe. They'd have their day over there, then they would get bussed home. And they would still be in a very ash-laden and smoky environment. So I guess it gave them a bit of relief. The authorities were quite slow to respond. I know they've got a little bit of a time constraint here, so I won't go into too much. Insurance companies have been very iffy about whether they'll cover any claims. For myself, my insurance company has said that they won't clean the roof of my house. I'm concerned about the roof cavity because people have to go up there to do electrical work, plumbing. I've noticed that the insulation is a little bit disrupted, so someone's going to have to go up there, and it's thick. I've actually got some samples that you can have a look at later. So they will not come and clean my cavity because it hasn't caused damage. My roof still functions as a roof. The insulation, well, it's still up there. So they're not very concerned about it. I'm hearing the same about ash in the house. Companies have refused to come and clean in the house. It's all very difficult, I must say. And I suppose another thing which I'd like you to think about is the cost of the fire. There was at least 2,000 firefighters who were drawn from interstate as well as all over Victoria. Some of those are volunteers, but many of them were paid firefighters. We had helicopters buzzing over for at least a month every day, quite close to my house. There'd be several helicopters dropping, I think about 3,000 litres per drop. They'd source most of that from the pondage. The bond which GDF Sewers had paid to the government was only $15,000 to rehabilitate an absolutely huge mine. It's grossly inadequate. So I don't know where they're going to start with that. They had removed some of the firefighting equipment which was in the mine. They didn't have any sprinklers. in the old SEC days, there'd be sprinklers all over the mine on a critical day such as the 9th of Feb. Now those sprinklers weren't present so that the coal faces were tinder dry, and so was the coal dust which was sitting on them. GDF sewers actually had to put in pipelines during the fire so that they could get water into the firefighting areas. So there's a big liability there as far as I'm concerned. And it's also a question as whether the regulation was sufficiently strong enough to have compelled them to do something to prevent this sort of incident. We've had quite a number of coal mine fires over the last 5, 7, 20 years. You know, it's not an uncommon event. They can't say they didn't know about it. I think I'll stop there. There's probably lots of things I could say, but I know I've had more than enough.
Lorraine, that was incredibly compelling. I lived in the Latrobe Valley for 3 or 4 years and used to work at the mines as an occ health and safety consultant, so I only know a little bit of down there. I'm interested, Lorraine, just one thing before you go, because you've come all this way. You mentioned the community group that sprung out of all the anarchy and the anger down there. Are you able to talk at all as to what's next for the community with all of this?
What happened a couple of days ago was that the community group took along a large bundle of papers to Bernard Tigg, who's conducting the inquiry. They've been doing community consultations, and there was 5 or 6 community consultations. So Bernard Tigg is a very well-renowned person. He conducted the bushfire inquiry, and he was in Traralgon on Wednesday. So the Voices of the Valley took along the large number of affidavits which they had collected from the community and gave them to Bernard Tigg. These detail all the health effects, the financial effects, any other bad effects which it may have had on the community, and they gave them all to him to assist with compiling what sort of aspects of the mine they would like to investigate. But it will also be a class action which is being run through Morris Blackburn.
Thank you again, Lorraine. We're getting a demonstration of the masks.
And that's it.
Okay.
You can imagine kids keeping these on. They're very uncomfortable, they're hot. But it was the normal fashion statement.
You can put your hands together again for Lorraine. So we've presented some information on the problem, on the health, and a real case study from just down the road, a community not dissimilar to this one. So now we're going to shift to values and solutions and future possibilities for this town beyond coal. And as I said, beyond coal, we don't know when that will be. It could be a few years, it could be a long way away. It's uncertain, we don't know. But ever since I've lived here, one of the groups that's been the most prominent in a lot of the work I've done has been Anglesea. And for those of you who don't know a lot about Anglesea, they've been running for 45 years. In terms of their size, they're remarkably large. They've got over 600 members, which for a community group looking at plants and indigenous, any land care group out there with 600 members would be stoked, I can guarantee you. Their annual wildflower show that's been going for 45 years is famous. Interstate, I know of people internationally that know about it. And on behalf of Anglesea, we've got the current president, Helen Tutt, coming to talk about the value of the heath.
I'd like to talk a little about one of Anglesea's treasures. That is, in the main, I believe, underappreciated by both the local and the broader community. Anglesea is frequently referred to as a town where bush meets sea, and so it is. But what do we mean by bush? To the east and the west, the bush is part of the Great Otway National Park, and to the north is the Anglesea Heath, some 7,200 hectares. It's the Alcoa leasehold. The majority of the Anglesea Heath is known as the land for conservation and is listed on the National Estate Register, Australia's national inventory of natural and cultural heritage places that have special values that are worth keeping for future generations and the present community. The values of the Anglesea Heath are best expressed in the following extract from the Anglesea Heath Management Plan, which was published in 2002. Millions of years ago, heathlands covered huge areas of Australia, but sadly little remain today. The Anglesea Heath is one of the remnants of natural vegetation in southwest Victoria that have escaped farming and urbanisation. Heathland communities do exist in other parts of Australia. They are all in some ways unique. The Anglesea Heath is different from any other Australian heathland. Nowhere else can we see the plant species that can combine to form the vegetation communities found here. In spring, a blanket of bushes and windswept vegetation erupt into a dazzling mosaic of colour, and that's an example. Orchids are an outstanding feature of the heathlands, from the tiny helmet orchid to the great sun orchid. Panoramic views of heathy woodlands are divided by moist river valleys that contain thickets of scented paper barks and tea tree. This naturally sculptured tapestry of heathlands and woodlands provides a haven and food source for numbers of birds, mammals, insects and other animals that all share a special relationship with the heathland vegetation. This remarkable biodiversity is the reason for listing this area on the national estate. From Anglesea's point of view, the most important and significant values of the heath are its natural heritage value. The area contains 7 different vegetation communities and forms part of the natural continuum between the ecosystems of the Otway Ranges. It has spectacular landscapes and significant geological, geomorphological and paleontological features. It has great biodiversity values. 29 mammal species have been recorded in the heath, including 2 nationally endangered species, the New Holland mouse and the southern brown bandicoot, and rare species such as swamp antechinus and the whitefoot. There are over 100 bird species. 25% of Victoria's plant species occur in this relatively small area, including 8 species that are rare or threatened at a national level and 20 at a state level. 2 species, the Anglesea grevillea and the Anglesea leek orchid, are endemic to the area. Well over a quarter of Victoria's orchid species are found in the Anglesea Heath, making it one of the most rich orchid sites in Australia. Many of the flora and fauna species are listed federally under the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act, and in Victoria under the Flora and Fauna Guarantee Act. In addition, the Anglesea Heath has cultural heritage values. It contains numerous significant archaeological sites, and its natural state provides a spiritual connection between the past, present and future generations of the Watherong and its community. Economic values. The Heath contributes significantly to the naturalness of the Great Ocean Road experience, and the economic contribution to the area through visitors is estimated to be similar to that of the Great Otway National Park. And in the early 2000s, it was estimated that there were over 500,000 visitors and they spent approximately $11 a head. So a significant contribution to the local economy. There are social values associated with the Heath. It contributes to the quality of life of present and future generations by providing recreational and leisure activities, as well as the opportunity to experience remoteness. There are also educational and research values. The Heath provides an outstanding opportunity to study internationally renowned and diverse series of ecosystems, an opportunity for greater understanding of protected area management, as well as an opportunity to promote cooperation between agencies, scientists and the wider community. Currently, the Anglesea Heath is jointly managed by Parks Victoria and Alcoa under a cooperative agreement management plan as Category 2 National Park. This recognises the land for conservation as a protected area as designated by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. First-time visitors to the Anglesea Heath may not be aware of the floristic richness and brilliance that exists between what is sometimes thought a drab exterior. However, if you're prepared to take the time for a closer look, you will be richly rewarded. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. As timekeeper, I've got to say I'm doing a great job. We're running 60 seconds behind time. So with questions too, there is time for questions at the end. We thought we'd get through all the presentations first and then open it up, but obviously not for too long because we do want to be gone by 4 o'clock. Now we switch focus slightly again. The context for these next couple of presentations is really, really big. Things are transforming really quickly. We've seen the emergence of social media and technology. Well, the other big transformation that's happening is with energy systems worldwide. In the last 5 years in Europe, energy stocks, energy utilities that are connected to fossil fuels have lost $60 billion in value. So the transformation is upon us. In California alone, they're light years ahead of where they thought they'd be in terms of closing down fossil fuel powered stations and the emergence of renewable energy. It's a transforming system that we're living in and we're seeing the outcomes of it every day. Our next speaker, Lee Eubank from Yes to Renewables. Lee is a campaigner with Friends of the Earth for this project, and it's a campaign focused for 100% renewable energy powered Victoria. They're striving to make Victoria a leader in green jobs and this new emerging economy. He's also had a role in helping out SCAR with some of their work, so I'd like to introduce Lee up to the stage.
G'day everyone, thanks for having me. And it looks like I'm going to be pointing my finger at Jacinta over there, who's going to magically flick over the slides.